So I'm gonna switch things up and I'm gonna do this in English, partly because actually while I'm from Venezuela, I can't say half of the words in these slides in Spanish, which would be something that would make my mom very not proud of myself. But also, we have a few people here who I know can't speak Spanish, so we'll just make it friendly for all of us. First of all, thank you, Sergio, for the invitation. For me, it's been a pleasure to be here. I sadly only booked the trip for 2 days, and I should have just come for at least a week. So I hope I get the invitation next year, because maybe I'll stay for 2 at least. But with that, let me perhaps get started by telling you guys a little bit more about Revit. And you see here, when we say we're a band of rebels, we're not really just talking about the team that we built. We're actually talking about the founders that we've partnered all around the globe. And why do we call them rebels? Because these founders are really challenging the status quo. And status quo is basically industries that are pervasive, they're exploiting the consumer, and at the same time are impeding innovation. And there's no better example of what that means than financial services. This is a little bit of the stats that we've aggregated from the entire portfolio of the impact that they've had all over the world, in especially the area of financial services. But while we spent 10 years really looking to basically change money and make money more accessible, we really haven't gotten yet to the point where we can say we have better money in the world. If today you try to send a payment to India or to the UK, likely it's gonna take you still a couple of days to do that. Everyone here, if you wanna have a financial product, you probably have to go through an application process and do all of that. No one here probably has money that while you're sleeping is optimizing for you. So we still think there's a lot that needs to be done to really make this space live up to like the expectations that we have for it. Here I'm basically listing 5 different things that we're seeing happening in the space that we think are kind of the weapons that these founders have to work really, really hard to deliver on the vision of better money. And we really think that the companies that are best positioned to deliver on that vision are actually digital brands, digitally native brands that we're starting to call consolidators. And why consolidators? We truly believe that financial services, or fintech as it is really going through that period, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that further in the presentation. This slide summarizes it super well. Well, why do we care about these consolidators? The reality is that consolidators have been 2% of public companies, but they actually have generated 91% of the wealth created in the last 100 years. So they're super, super important. And if you're thinking about who's gonna be able to literally like go against the big banks that have generated so much profits, it's only gonna be companies that are really able to fund themselves and deliver on this vision. And this concept of consolidators and compounding is not something that we made up. If you actually look at tech, it's something that has happened over there. Some of these companies started with a very simple product, but right now they're in everything we do, every day, every app, every phone. They're really touching our lives in every single way. And we think too that financial services is actually very early in that cycle. And what we're gonna see in the next 20 years, it's consolidation in a similar way to what we have seen in tech. Why does it matter? So you can see there, financial services is huge. It's a massive opportunity, and it's really what makes us so excited about transforming this space. And while I started with the stats of our portfolio companies of the amazing impact that they've had around the world, the reality is like we're still very, very early. Like these are the categories that challengers have been able to penetrate, and it's still very much below 7% all across of them. Consolidation, I just showed the stats on the tech side, but it's something that has also happened in financial services. If you look over the last 3 decades, the number of banks in the US has basically decreased by 2/3. And we also know from financial services what a consolidator actually looks like. If you look at JP Morgan, since Jamie Dimon joined in 2006, they become basically the leading financial player across all major products in the US. Stripe is a huge company, but if you look at how much JP Morgan is processing, it's still five times the payment revenues of Stripe. Look at wealth management of a company like Robinhood, or even consumer card volume of a company like Nubank. JP Morgan is 50 times the size of those players. Wow. This is a prettier slide that we'll share with you guys afterwards. It's been a bit modified, but you might ask, why are actually these challengers that we're talking about best positioned to win? If you think about it, all these brands, digitally native brands, are in a position where they build great products, they can iterate super quickly, they create better experiences that leads to more engagement, and the more engagement you have with consumers and merchants, the more data and context you have that can lead to like an even better and more personalized experience. There's also examples for a lot of these. If you think about Revolut, today they're connecting over 100,000 SMBs on their platform with their 23 million monthly users, offering all these range of products. If you think about Mercado Libre, it's quite similar. It's 50 million consumers on the marketplace, and then you have 50 million consumers on Mercado Pago. Aggregate, there's a lot you can do with all the context that this provides you. Block is very similar. We have 80 million of Cash App actives interacting with a huge network of merchants that is providing a lot of context on how can you serve these consumers better. And there's actually three things that are very interesting that allow these digitally native brands to just have a much better business model than a JP Morgan could ever have. If you think about it, once you have millions of merchants and you have millions of consumers, you can basically do something that we've started calling on-us payments. Remove the intermediary. You all of a sudden don't need to pay the payment companies 2%. You can just do that in-house. And at the same time, you're offering a better proposition for your merchants and your consumers. Lending, you have so much data. I'm sure Susie's gonna talk a little bit more about that when she comes up here. But once you have all these merchants and consumers on your platforms, you're understanding their revenues, where they're spending money, their finances, and you just have so much more context to do a lot better credit than any incumbent is able to. And lastly, another trend that we're really excited is commerce and advertising. Same thing. You have so much context on what these consumers and merchants like that all of a sudden you can actually be a marketplace. You can show advertising that caters to those people that are on your platform. And then on top of that, very much related to what I was just talking about with data and context, these players are also much better positioned to really take advantage of AI. When you think about a JP Morgan, they're probably thinking about you from a number of accounts, and likely they can link you up with where you have your auto loan and your credit card. But when you think about the companies that have been built in this space, they're a lot better positioned to really take advantage of that. And this is a really great quote of like, how can we really think about what AI might mean to financial services? And if you thought that basically the smartphone was now you have the bank on your pocket, you can think about AI as essentially having every banker in your pocket. And that was something that David said in a podcast recently. These challengers are also much better positioned to embrace how the grid of financial services are changing. This is an example of PhonePe, which is a company in India. UPI is essentially the Pix equivalent in India. And this company has managed to gather 50% market share of those payments in the country. And now with that additional context, they're doing ads, they're doing insurance, they do products like wealth. And then they're so well positioned to continue innovating and really developing whatever else initiatives the Indian government has. Now, this is Something else that when you see is, we like to remind ourselves, it's really important that while the space is big and the opportunity is huge, timing it also matters a lot. This is an example of Block, who essentially has increased gross profit by 7x. They have multiple business lines that are generating over $100 million in gross profit. And in that same time, as they've increased gross profit that much, their multiple of where the stock is trading has basically re-rated alongside with what the industry has, but also they've had M&A and stock-based compensation affect a little bit their price. And this is something, don't look at this, that we're not, very similar to the previous slide that I was showing on Block. I think you can probably plot here also with a very similar shape what we're seeing as the financial service, if fintech comes in the market, which shows that it's really never been a better time to spend time on the space and really invest in all these players. The other amazing thing about these digital brands and consolidators is that they went through a period where capital was very abundant. They were burning a lot of money, but a lot of them have basically learned the lessons and have gotten to manage and control their own destiny. So when you're generating that amount of profit, what's amazing of that is all of a sudden you don't need to raise capital. You don't need to be dependent on anything else. You can basically just reinvest those profits and continue building for the better product that you want to deliver. And this is actually a great slide when people sometimes talk to us about the fintechs that we backed. If you think about Amazon, or even if you, it all started as a bookstore, right? But if you probably ask any Gen Z or a 20-year-old whether Amazon was a bookstore, they probably won't know, but they will definitely know them for all the brands that you have on the other side. When we look at fintech, we think about it very, very similarly. Nubank is just a bank, Stripe is just a payment processor, Robinhood is just a brokerage. And it's just for us to imagine what these companies can build with everything I've described on the right-hand side. So I'll stop there. But it's a little bit about the things that we're thinking about in the fintech space and the areas where we're spending time and thinking about as a fund.